different spice. Now, obviously, if you're someone who wants to watch and do it, that's the ideal way, right? Just as if you want to watch and enjoy that straight fire banter and the historical context, you've got to watch me, right? So, c'est la vie. Episode 13, Thorin versus Reddit. Ooh, 13, unlucky number, they say. Isn't at all, of course, unless you're Grandmaster of the Knights Templar or whatever it was. No, Jacques de Molay, look it up. But it is an unlucky number if you're a pleb on Reddit. Then again, if you're a pleb on Reddit, I feel like you've already been somewhat unlucky in your life and haven't really chosen necessarily the right paths and opportunities. So let's get into this. As I pointed out in the last episode, I think it was actually maybe the simple one. I've upgraded my setup here. I don't just read it out anymore. I read it with you on the screen so you can see yourself what I'm reading. So here we go. It was from a thread that was about Richard Lewis's video where he, on his stream, went over the thread of people who were complaining and crying about CLG Red being invited to ESEA, I think season 28 or something, Advanced Division, this new division, which includes an invite component. And obviously the premise of Richard's video and why it was a little bit silly that people were complaining is it's absolutely reasonable to complain about that team being invited on the basis that they're not good enough to be in the league. That's a great argument to have. There's a counter to it, and whether or not we should have a meritocracy, etc., for invites. But the problem is most people complained and then made it that they were only invited because they're girls, whereas actually it's because they're much more popular, will draw more interest, have more sponsor interest to what is relatively a small league, and every other team that you could replace them with would be a skill upgrade and a better team, but significantly worse in that regard. So just monetarily in terms of business, it made a lot of sense. And the problem is, because people got distracted into what essentially was a kind of discrimination and sexism, because yes, I understand that it's because they're a female team and a female pro team that they're being invited, but it's not because they are just a female team. You wouldn't invite just another random team of females that have no sponsorship and not famous at all just because they're women. No, that wouldn't make sense. That's not what ESL, or ESEA rather, it's the same parent company, was doing. But this comment I thought was interesting because this guy at least went to the aspect of meritocracy. And he says here, 28 points, this is more about whether CSGO should prioritize marketing value or meritocracy when it comes to competition. So whether or not it should be about how popular people are and how many eyes that'll draw, or whether it should be meritocracy about how good you are at the game. In CSGO, there is no franchise system, and through the major qualification system and ECS/ESL leagues, it naturally embraces the meritocracy. So when you give a coveted league slot to a team with significantly more marketing power and little to no results, people will get upset, rightfully so. The solution would be to run some sort of playoffs/qualifier for all those teams. But that is not going to happen since the results would not be in ESEA's best interest. So the thing to understand about this is that, first and foremost, this is making too much of a dichotomy, which I consider false, because it's not that they're choosing either marketing value, I mean, he just says prioritizing, or meritocracy, because if they were prioritizing marketing value, then as in line with what I suggested before, you would actually get like half the female teams that have any sponsorship in NA. You'd put them all in this league, and you'd have, since they're just saying prioritizing, not only focusing on that, you'd have some teams that were good relative to this level, and you'd have a bunch of teams that were there just for marketing value. And that's not what ESL did. What they did is every single other team was invited based on merit or some other factor. And then this one team who happens to, despite playing at such a low level, have an absurdly magnitude higher amount of sponsor interest and marketability than any of the teams at their level, even the best team at their level, that they invited this one team for some of the invite slots. As far as I know, some of the others were based directly on record within leagues, so not even every slot was based just on invite. Now, that isn't really unreasonable when you consider that in this scenario, there's one team that sticks out. They are an absolute outlier to every other team at this level, but will bring more attention. So understandably, ESL says we'll spend one invite on that. But the rest of them, yeah, make them the right teams, make them the proper teams. That doesn't really seem like an unreasonable demand, bearing in mind, I would actually guess at the very lower levels there, you don't really get a whole lot out of it if you're ESL putting on this tournament. You're trying to do it to have a real healthy system so that people could get promoted from this league to another league, and then from there to MDL, and then from there to Pro League. Okay, understandable. But in this scenario, this is a way to directly monetize or increase interest and exposure of a lower league. So I think that's quite reasonable. Also, the problem here is if you read his comment and you came from League of Legends, you'd go, oh, right, well, even though CS doesn't have LCS, etc., it's actually got a system where you have to qualify for everything. There's no marketing value prioritized because, you have qualification for the major and you've got the ECS and the ESL leagues. And as a result, it naturally embraces meritocracy. Yeah, cool. You've just made a good argument there as to why we've already got the meritocracy for all the good teams. And in some other tournaments, we can afford to have one-off exhibitions, or we could have an only invite tournament. Or in fact, we could have what I suggested one time in a video, which is I just pick the teams that go to a tournament and I pick the matches and I make it like Vince McMahon style and I'm running the show and I'm being crazy. Also, you got to add in, here's another way to think about it. Those aren't the only types of tournaments and competitions in CSGO. For a start off, IEM tournaments, ESL tournaments. Some of these tournaments have invites. Now, yes, they spend the invite on the best teams generally to prevent them having to qualify. You know why? Because actually, even some of the best teams wouldn't make it, as you see in each season of EPL and ECS, despite the fact that they're the best teams because of the nature of online tournaments and online qualifiers, and it's not the same as LAN play. But also, within those invites, not every time, but fairly frequently, when they get to the end of the invites, it will be really debatable. Like there'll be teams where, okay, the great example last year was, I think it was where, I can't remember if it was NIP or Cloud9, but at the time, Cloud9 hadn't had all their big results in the summer. This is before, because ESL Cologne itself was in like July. And when they announced that Cloud9 was invited to the major, it implied, and it turned out to be correct, that meant Gambit wasn't in, not the major, ESL 1 Cologne. Gambit hadn't been invited. And at the time, Gambit's results had been much better than Cloud9's. It had much more top placings, many more big upset wins over people. You also could argue they have a CIS contingent that wants to watch them. But ESL made the decision, no, we will invite Cloud9 because they have a much bigger fan base. Obviously, all the people on Reddit love NA teams. I mean, Cloud9 has the most flares on Reddit. Again, this is just a good way to ensure people watch. Now, that was debatable. So in that scenario, it's not like some egregious abuse of power, but they clearly did on that one prioritize marketing value over meritocracy. So this happens actually semi-frequently, I have to say. If there's a Star Series tournament, even if they have 10 of the best teams in the world, they're going to find a way to get nearly all the big CIS squads they can get. If you have a tournament, IEM Katowice, doesn't matter that Virtus.pro were fucking bombs this year. They still got invited to that tournament because it ensures live viewers, live fans, which is a component people aren't thinking about here. Obviously, it's not the case for this particular league. And then also ensures more online fans and more general interest from people who are more casual fans. So I think it's unreasonable to present it like this is like a one-off incident. No, this is actually something that's pernicious within esports. And while as a purist, yes, I agree with you. I would personally just want to see the best teams play. But I also am not someone who is capable of getting big sponsors, is capable of running big leagues and doing all the logistical things that make these leagues possible. So when the people who do those leagues tell me, in order to make more money, to make a reasonable profit, to make then this incentivized for us, we have to have a little bit of compromise. Now, we won't go full compromise, Thorin. We'll still invite most of the best teams, and most teams have to qualify, but we'll have a couple of slots that we'll use to ensure that we can hit certain thresholds and numbers of fan interest to make the financials add up. I say, you know what? I wouldn't do it personally, but fair play. I can at least understand it. And it's certainly not ridiculous and some purely unethical approach or immoral in what you're doing. So I thought this guy made a very good point. This is what the discussion should have been about. Could have been a great discussion. Sadly, instead, we ended up with a scenario where people just made it about, oh, it's just because they're bloody women. Whereas it's like, well, no, it's not because they're women. It's because they happen to be famous players with marketability. Now, is some of that because they're women? Yes, but they have to, A, be the best of the women, and still there has to be a scene in which there's money separately allocated. I've made this point a million times, but I'll just say it once again. One of the reasons why these teams get that money is not because it's taken out of the prize pool and the sponsor money for men. It wouldn't exist otherwise. It is only given to people like ESL from the likes of Intel, because Intel specifically wants to promote women and female gaming. So it's not should we take that and put it in the men's? We couldn't. It either exists or it doesn't. So guess what? In a scenario in that case, I'm in favor of it, that it exists. Now, I don't like it when that gets spun, obviously, into sexist narratives that like, oh, look, women are segregated. No, they chose to do that. So these are entirely different topics, which again, when you conflate them all, especially when you make them very simplistic, you don't end up with a very interesting debate, quite frankly. So this comment was from the same thread, and this is a 16-point comment, but 17-point rather, but it's got nothing to do with the crying about being females. What this guy says is someone said something along the lines of like, you know, I don't know, I don't think this video will get attention, because he'd seen all those other threads where people were going apeshit. So he's like, oh, I don't think people will be interested. And as usual, whenever you sort of say, essentially, what would, if I had to translate it and put square brackets to explain all the context, it would say, you know, when I saw Reddit and everyone was going ham against this and all the upvoted comments were against it, so I don't think it'll be successful. You always get this guy or this type of guy pops up, and the gist of their comment is always, Reddit is lots of people, therefore you can't ever suggest that Reddit has a certain opinion. So this guy says, I mean, it's a pretty big sub, and people comment on the threads that appeal to them. If only a few hundred out of 600k comments on the CLG Red post with stupid comments, they become a vocal minority. Most people on this sub don't comment that way. What's great is, you are absolutely correct. But you have missed what the guy is communicating. You've looked at the guy's words and you have missed what he is communicating. So what he is communicating is his experience of how Reddit had collectively had responded with the people who were vocal. In other words, the people who commented, because that would be the only people he would be talking about. He's not talking about people who didn't comment. So to now mention that most people don't think that way and didn't comment is irrelevant. That has no bearing on what he was saying, regardless of the words he said. Then when you say that this correct opinion that yes, that doesn't represent all of Reddit. No, but that guy is communicating his experience and he was frustrated with his experience. So it doesn't matter that there are hundreds of thousands of people who wouldn't tweet that way. They aren't commenting now. Therefore, they're having no bearing on his experience, which is what he is communicating. What's weird is this actually comes across as a very strange, almost like, I would say hyper-rational, to a degree that it misses the point of communication, which is to communicate an idea and to express and discuss the idea, not to get stuck in the particulars of the words someone said. It's different sometimes when you talk about the words, because the words might very much betray a certain sense, but that's not what was going on with this guy. So this comment is where it was from a thread about Fallen being the in-game leader on Inferno. Cold Zero saying that. And this guy says, Stu, so Stu2K, used to in-game lead for Cloud9. Bolts did a lot of calling for Immortals. Why not just have 4 in-game leaders that specialize in 1 or 2 maps? Right, first and foremost, I'll give you a very simple reason as to why not. Because Stu2K himself only was the in-game leader for Cloud9 out of necessity. When he got the chances to, he gave it over to Automatic. He gave it over to Tarek. He didn't want to be the in-game leader. And quite frankly, I don't think Cloud9 was at their best necessarily when he was the in-game leader. He individually was at his best, but Cloud9 at the time used to always lose to the big European teams when they got to the semis, to the finals, and he used to play quite badly actually in those matches. So I can understand, and I think he's right not to want to do it. Now, in terms of Bolts, again, Bolts did it in Immortals out of necessity. First of all, so they could get rid of Peacemaker. Then, later on, they let Zeus come, they gave it over to him. I think Steel even did it at one point in time. It seems to me as though they didn't really seem like they were at their best when Bolts was doing it, and he didn't really seem like he naturally liked it as much. I know that sort of a player, like I always call them like the Brazilian Crims, they seem like they should be great in-game leaders because they have a great sense for the game, they're very calm, they make the right decisions, but they're not going to be able to do that as much individually themselves, and that's sort of an intuitive genius for the game, or aptitude. It's not the same as the cerebral, like monitoring and analysing kind of way of thinking about the game that an in-game leader has. So I don't think it's actually as straight a fit, and as I said, he gave that a roll up himself. So then what he says, why not just have 4 in-game leaders that specialise in 1 or 2 maps? Right, here's the thing. In one sense, I agree, and in another, I completely disagree. I would agree that a number of teams, especially the really good ones, but that have very limited map pools. So I'm thinking of like Team Liquid, Mouse Sports, Fnatic. These teams have like 4 maps, and usually 2 or 3 they're really good at, and one's like middling, and then the rest, they drop off really heavily. I think those teams should look into that just to add 1 or 2 more maps to their pool. So on one map, find, oh, well, we don't really play Cash. Oh, right, but actually it turns out that this other player, maybe Flosher or something, sick at calling on Cash. Just have him do it so we can occasionally play it, or when teams make us play it, we can win on it. If your mouse spots maybe go like, on a map like, I mean, what would it be for mouse spots that they're not as good on? Probably cash as well for them, right? So for them on cash, let's go away from that. Let's have someone else, maybe a Sticko calls on this map. That would make sense to me, to have a little bit of a competitive advantage or to shore up your weaknesses. The idea that you'd just take all these in-game leaders, so Cold Zero, Stew 2K, Fallen, Bolts, and you'd split it up so they each do 1 or 2 maps, I think you would end up with a much worse team. Because first of all, you're going to play these maps in best of 3 series. So one person's going to be swapping off after another map, and therefore the other guy who's the in-game leader won't have the same feeling of what the other in-game leader's doing in the series. He won't be able to make the mid-map adjustments the same way, because it's very different to watch a demo and to be in the server and to feel the resistance of what an enemy's doing and what it feels like you can do and where your danger zone is and what seems like it's working even if you didn't actually win the round, but you can sense that there's a hole there. You want to build that up throughout a series, and that's why oftentimes the third map of a close series, where 16-10 either way, is like the 16-14 amazing game, because all the adjustments come in and the cerebral in-game leaders are able to apply what they need to the third map, which tends to be closer to the middle of the map pool because we made our bans, we made our picks, and then we all agree to play this third map. So in that scenario, I think it would be a detriment. Generally, I think it would be a detriment as well, because a leader needs to be able to make adjustments between series and between different games he plays in tournaments against different opponents based on what was going on before. You wouldn't have that as much, again, with the different in-game leaders. And also, you want a cohesive overall style. And so that style is going to come and be heavily informed by the in-game leader. Now, if he does a good job, he should also consider his personnel, what type of star players he has, what type of tempo they like to play in terms of what maps he does. But you want that cohesive style on most of your maps to be fairly similar, so that even when we're swapping map and opponent, the team still has a sense of how to play and what to do. If you had all these different in-game leaders, because understandably they're going to have different styles and a different vision of the game, that's why they would work on the different maps, you're going to be messing with the style and the rhythm of the team generally, and I think that ultimately would be detrimental, even though I can see where you're coming from, just spitballing an idea. So this was a thread that was about Ozstriker, who was a 1.6 pro, and I think in the very early days of CSGO played and was an in-game leader, and famously, by the way, was one of those guys who was an absolute bot as a player, but a decent enough in-game leader. I never thought he was a genius, but he was decent enough. And he's the current LDLC coach, and he explained to, I think it was NBK or Kenny S, how to fix G2. And his suggestion was that the players should go and do sort of like a part-time job or some internship and just work in like a shop, because the idea is when they realize how much a normal job sucks and how little you get paid and how little fun it is, you'd come back renewed with a sense that, like, fuck, what an awesome job I have. I'm going to put all my time in this and get really motivated. Now, I get what he's saying, certainly. And I would say, like, it's more that people needed that somewhere earlier in their life to be in a position now where they've developed discipline and routine and the ability to motivate themselves and drive themselves. It's obviously a little bit naive as a suggestion, or a little bit tongue-in-cheek to suggest you actually do it now with these players. I don't think it would help at all, actually. But this comment, 40 points, says, because it was people talking about, obviously, the fact they make so much money. Lol, seriously. I have a college degree, and I'm pretty sure these guys make at least 5 times as much money as me. Lack of professionalism in esports was expected and understandable 5 to 10 years ago, when most pro gamers were kids or deadbeats living with their parents. But these guys are making enough money in 2018 that they need to be professional. I agree they need to be professional, but one thing I always tend to do with how I model the world, and I talk about what we can do and what we should do, I don't really like the term should, like what I think would be a good idea, is I try not to blame people for things that are in their human nature, or that if you actually knew their life situation, have very good reasons, or there's an explanation that's quite logical as to how they got to this position. So one of the reasons I would say that so many of the pro gamers behave this way is because since pro gaming only got to this level of salary 2 or 3 years ago, and it's possible, although I'm skeptical, that perhaps being young has something to do with like fast twitch muscle fiber and how good you are in that sense. if that's the case, maybe it's understandable. There aren't more older players. But if we get, so it's like a sport where, you know, the average age of a player is going to be like 27 years old, and you're going to have people playing until they're 34 if they're veterans, and you're going to have the young guy, but he's going to be 16, 17, but he's going to be put in a team with someone who's 28 and a bunch of players who are 25. First of all, you will create team cultures that instill in these players, you've got to work hard, this is how you work as a pro, because that's what happens in traditional sports. The people who are older and mature have matured and have learned from their life lessons and can pass on some of that wisdom, and in fact demand it of the younger players. Otherwise, young players won't be able to make it through that filter of hard work into the top end of the scene, no matter how talented they are. That will fix it. And the fact you won't have so many young players making up the majority of the teams means you'll have less players, fewer players who are in the position where they're not working hard enough and they're just dicking around. Because I think that's very much to do with either A, being young, but being young because being young tends to come due to lack of life experience and lessons learned and interaction with other people, from being immature. You haven't had a chance to mature, and you haven't had the right catalysts around you to force that maturity. So I get what he means. They're on the surface, yeah, they should, but they're not going to. And also, a lot of these players got to the threshold years ago where you're already making enough money that you try as much as you can. Doesn't matter if you pay these guys 5 times more than they get paid now. They won't practice anymore. Like, their motivation isn't tied just to money. And people who say that, oh, it would be for me, you haven't been in that position. That's why you don't know. And also, you're a different person. So this comment was from the game online in ECS where Luminosity played SK Gaming. Luminosity won 2-0. And this guy with 113 points says, I love myself a good 10-5 lead bloke. This was the game, I believe, where SK kept getting like double-digit CT side round wins, and then they were fucking up the T round and losing the game. All the other way around, whatever. And then this guy, so first of all, if you blow the game from 10-5, to some degree you've blown the game. I'd obviously have to see the specific game to know on the key rounds if you did, because again, you are switching halves, so it's now a different match. You don't get any momentum from being up 10 rounds because it's a totally different half. And in fact, if you're on a map where double-digit CT sides are common, then it's your opponent's turn to see if he can do that. There's no logical reason as to why you threw the game if you then lose 11-4 on the second half and lose the match. You know, maybe he just did a slightly better CT side. It might not be anything to do with what you did because you're not playing T side, not CT side. But then this guy takes it way too far the other way, and he says, 36 points, 10-5 is hardly a joke. Other teams wins pistol, and it's 10-8. They only need one gun round, and it's 10-10. Now, the problem with that is, he's right on one level. Like, the score isn't as extreme as it might seem. Like, the reason why saying 10-5 is a lead blow might seem, which by the way, he didn't say was a choke, might seem extreme, is because it's one thing if you're at 14-5 and you lose the game, right? Yes, you probably had to make some big time mistakes and poor decisions and have some really terrible play to not get any rounds and let the other team get 11 rounds while you only get 4. Yeah, you probably fucked that up. But in the world where, oh yeah, I guess you don't have to get 4, but in a world where, so the problem there is it looks like, wow, you let 11 rounds go. Well, you didn't really, did you? You probably let 3 or 4 rounds go, and there's probably 1 or 2 questionable rounds in the middle, and then after that, some you had no control over, ecos, or rounds where you were just, the guys who had the guns were on the wrong sites. You know, in this scenario, or you didn't have any utility. In those scenarios, those rounds weren't even, and therefore you're not always to blame for losing them. So he's right in the sense that if the other team wins the pistol, and then the first gun round, they're at 10-10, it's an even score already. Yes, I agree with him in that sense, but the flaw here is you definitely could still choke the game beyond that. Like, you could fail to get any rounds after that when you get your guns, and then when you get your economy going, and you could win a round and then lose the next one, get eco'd back and get reset. So in that scenario, you definitely could still choke because he's only got it to 10-10. It's not like he's then like, you just have to lose another gun round and then fail your force and then you win one, you get reset. Like, you know, if about 9 things have to happen and all go wrong for you and you were a good team or better or slightly favored, you probably did choke or throw the game to some sense. Definitely depends though on the context of what the opponent did, because if they really did some amazing shit, they might have just outplayed you in all these rounds and made some amazing calls, maybe even predicated on what you did earlier on your half that they learned from and applied themselves. So I can go either way on this one, but I think a little bit too simplistic in how he tried to apply it there. Right, this was from a thread where it was about the major selection process FAQ, so frequently asked questions that Valve posted, or rather, I think they just updated it. I think it had always been there. And this guy who has 46 points says, wait, they just released this now? Wait, they released this just now? That's strange. ? quite a bit of information. Interesting that they shut down the idea that some popular analysts have been propagating about Valve not allowing other games during majors. Also interesting that they've already chosen who will host the next event, right? First of all, when he says interesting that they shut down the idea that some popular analysts have been propagating, right? I realize he's doing that to facetiously imply that the people who are doing it, presumably me, Richard, I would guess, I'm not sure about some of the other, maybe Moses, that we're not real analysts. Now, you can do that in like a tongue-in-cheek manner if you're saying like, well, he is an analyst, you just shit at it. Okay. But I have to say, oftentimes when I see this on Reddit, people actually believe that. Like they believe that because they didn't like the way you wrote an article and you were negative about their team, that you're not actually even a journalist. Well, I mean, you are patently a journalist. Like it's your job, it's your career. In my case, I've won Journalist of the Year, been considered one of the best analysts by many people. So it doesn't really make sense, but whatever. We'll ignore that snark for now. And then he says that it shuts down the idea that Valve are not allowing other games during majors. Right. That's not necessarily the case because, first of all, don't know if you're familiar with this concept. It's called politics. And part of politics is manipulation of people's perceptions through techniques of persuasion and public relations. As in, sometimes a politician says something and it's not only not what he's going to do, it's not accurate to the facts, and it's not even what he thought at any point in time, but he says it for a specific response or to convey a certain sense or information to people that he wants them to believe. Some would call it lying. Now, in this particular case, the person at Valve saying this, we don't know who they are. We don't know if they're the same people who made the decision in past years. I don't know who this John McDonald guy is. I've never met him when I've gone to the Valve majors. I meet the other couple of guys I've seen at all the others. Never met this John McDonald guy. Is it him who wrote it? No fucking clue. Is it the case that this new guy has never heard of this as a factor? In which case it was a factor before and it isn't now. Maybe it was just generally for real a factor before and isn't the case now. What these people tend to always try to do is the reason why they go like analysts is they think we just make this shit up. You know where we heard that thing about Valve not wanting other games during majors? From Valve devs and Valve themselves. And people close to Valve. That's who we heard it from. Now, would you rather we didn't give you that information? That isn't official, hence why it's coming from us. Or would you rather it didn't exist at all? Would you rather have no basis to make any decisions or any sense of the world whatsoever? Because Valve wasn't communicating with you in the past. Would that be a good thing? No, of course not. So again, it's the usual sort of thing where people are mad at something and like, listen, you have the right to be mad and express your opinion all you want. But what you're mad at doesn't logically add up and really is just something inside yourself that you're a bit pissed off at. It doesn't really have anything to do with the situation that happened. Now, this was a thread about... it was the thread where someone took my tweet where I pointed out that Valve has made something nuts, like, you know, the better part of $1 billion, but they still haven't changed some aspects of the game. Like, for example, we don't get more communication, etc. And yet, or give us more, I think it was more maps even, despite the fact that it's like, if they're making $1 billion, if you know how little old games like Counter-Strike make, what would ever motivate them to? What does it have to be $2 billion before they'll make some new maps and put in place a proper system? And this guy with 355 points says, but it's working and they are making lots of money. Why change? Shitty for us. Brilliant strategy from Valve. From a company point of view, they are doing great, right? I would say on this last part, from a company point of view, no, I'd say in terms of making money. So if that's what you mean, yes. Now, not all companies only have the goal of making money. They might have to say that, and the shareholder world of public offerings might mean that that's kind of the way they have to behave. But I think a lot of companies, the decisions made there, Apple's a good example. Some of the decisions made there by the likes of Steve Jobs in the past actually actively hurt their business. Some of the weird things he did, making it closed systems, not having certain options where you could put different wires in, that didn't always make them more money. It wasn't always well received. He did it because he actually thought that that was a better consumer experience and that's the way it should be. And he had his own vision for the world and he was more interested in changing the world to his vision than changing his vision to match the world, which is what you would be suggesting Valve's done here. So yes, they've made a lot of money, right? Congrats. I'm not begrudging them the money, but they could also make just as much money, in fact, maybe even more money, and do these extra things. And why change? Because money's not the only thing in life, mate. Especially once you make it past the threshold where you need to live and provide for your family. Now, when you're becoming rich, the brilliance of being rich is not to go, haha, I'm rich, nothing else matters in life, I'll do nothing. No, what's great about being rich is money can now buy you time. You can get time off. You can work your own hours. You can choose things. You have freedoms that money can enable you to choose from. And these freedoms allow you to do what you actually want to do something great, to do something fantastic. That's why patronage was so important in like the Renaissance period, because this patronage allowed someone to not have to work in the field, but to be an artist and to create what he felt, express the kind of the poetry of his soul. They didn't just go, oh, cool, I'm getting paid now, so I'll just only ever do, like, you know, shitty little cartoons and just stuff like that. No, they would do some things for commission, and then the rest of the time was theirs to create their art with, and you got Leonardo da Vinci's work, etc. In this scenario, it's all this. I just find it so cynical and disappointing, because it is someone who has just been sucked into this kind of like sense of what the world is like, that is just about money, and that's all that operates things. I think that's an incredibly poor macro analysis of the world. In micro analysis, it works in many scenarios, but on a macro level, I don't think that many people are only motivated by money. Sometimes people are motivated by money and power. Sometimes they're motivated by money and drive to express themselves. There's all sorts of different factors that are going into it. So I think there's lots of good reasons as to why they've changed. And I don't think you can just like explain it away like, it's fine that they do that. Now, yeah, it's somewhat accurate, some of the things you're saying, but I don't think it has to be that way is the point. This comment was from NBK, who said that Shocks didn't want to play with them anymore. And then this guy, 369 points, says, yeah, NBK's philosophy is more focused on feeding his ego. Now, I have no clue what basis this guy has to say that. Like, he doesn't give any more information, doesn't give like some track record NBK has of doing things that he considers feeding his ego. In fact, I have to say, this strikes me as kind of like cognitive dissonance, where this guy's been presented with the fact that NBK's sort of saying something critical of Shocks. And yes, much like you, I think Shocks is a better Counter-Strike player, at least a more skilled Counter-Strike player than NBK, and a more valuable player overall in my own hierarchy. So yes, part of me, when I see that comment, goes like, oh, NBK's criticizing a player better than him. But then I immediately stop and go, well, I've matured as a person, so I know it's not just about like ability to headshot people. It's about how good you are as a teammate, what kind of work ethic you have, what kind of role you play within your squad. Even beyond that, you know, you can criticize someone. Doesn't matter if you're worse, you can criticize that they made a mistake. They still made a mistake, no matter if you make 5 mistakes. And you certainly are allowed to point that out. It's absolutely reasonable in intellectual discussion. So this guy, it feels like he's threatened that NBK is criticizing Shocks, who perhaps he likes or thinks is better than Shocks, or maybe he thinks NBK is rubbish and therefore shouldn't comment. And therefore he's thinking, oh, NBK is just doing that because of his ego, that Shocks is better than him or eschewed him. It's like, that's cognitive dissonance, and your reaction to the cognitive dissonance is, rather than to engage with NBK's point and criticize that, is to say, oh, I'm just going to read NBK's mind and attribute to him all these like bad faith reasons as to why he would make what, to me, I'm talking about Thorin, seems like a reasonable criticism, actually. So he doesn't attack MBK's point, he just attacks MBK as a person. And I notice this is a trend, actually, that a lot of people think because, I mean, it's something I revealed myself in an article a few years back, that MBK is kind of the kingmaker of the scene. What they don't stop and think is, why is he the kingmaker? He's not the kingmaker because he's like Littlefinger out of Game of Thrones and just some arsehole like manipulating things. He's the kingmaker because traditionally he has been the linchpin piece of all the successful teams, because he is a very talented player and a very cerebral player who is able to put himself in a position where he will do whatever's needed. He will fill whatever spot you need in the team, and therefore synergize with the in-game leader and then provide a bridge to the stars. And that makes him incredibly valuable as an individual player. And hence, every good in-game leader and great team wants NBK to be part of that team. That's what makes him the kingmaker. It's not just that he's manipulating things like Littlefinger did for the sake of his own ego and for the fact that he'd been hard treated in his own life and he wanted to get revenge on people and to rule the world and beat out the bullies, as it were. No. So I think this is quite an unreasonable statement. And the fact it's that upvoted, I mean, that's all it needs to tell you about how the old circle jerk does just go on Reddit for or against people. Because this is a guy where you go back to like 2015, he was one of the most beloved players in the world. Yes, people who didn't like French players or French attitudes would be like, NB cry. But I think he was appreciated as being a fabulous and very valuable player, both in the server and out of the server. And by the way, he's one of the only players that has a great work ethic consistently and does try to play the new style of Counter-Strike, whereas some of these other guys who are much better players don't do these things, don't put in the hours, and don't update themselves. So they're absolutely open to criticism, and it's in no way hypocrisy. Right, this is a comment that it's one of those ones where I'm not dissing it. I just love it, and I wanted to highlight it for you guys. So it's in a thread that was about the existence interview where he talked about, like, you know, making the team with Smiths and Shocks and possibly Kenny S. And this guy, 16 points, says r/global offensive logic. And there's 4 bullet points. Every team needs 4 superstars and 1 high fragging in-game leader. That's definitely something people try to suggest. And I think it is so wrong, it is unbelievable. Even FaZe is not actually like that because olofmeister is not a superstar in the modern day. So even he, for me, is just a slightly overpowered entry fragger or support player. And so that's kind of cool in its own way. But actually, I think that's one of the flaws that team had. They also don't have a high fragging in-game leader. Kerrigan can have games where he does, but he's not some absurd fragger. I actually don't know of a single team that ever existed with 4 superstars and 1 high fragging in-game leader. People just want it to exist for some bizarre reason. It's also a ridiculous way to model a game, not at all how I see it. Then he says, 2 losses in a row on LAN means the lowest performing member has to be castrated and sold into prostitution. There is absolutely no possibility that that player may prosper in another role or team. Absolutely correct. I'd also add prosper in this team. Like, people just write them off completely, that they can never be good. And then obviously, I mean, you think of some of the players in the past who were playing poorly, actually. Like, I've absolutely criticized Guardian when he was in Na'Vi with Simple. He was playing well under a superstar level, yet he was getting superstar resources. Well, he goes over to FaZe and he's absolutely prospered and looked fantastic. Totally different team. Somewhat different role. He actually was given a more reduced role in FaZe, and therefore he was able to exceed expectations because Guardian knew, like, okay, don't make this guy the hard carry like he's had to be in Na'Vi for the years before Simple. So yeah, that is also a great point. People always say that. And then this one, FPL performance is indicative of hypothetical pro team performance. Now, what's funny is, I remember in 2015 when olofmeister was in God mode. He was maybe the best player we'd ever seen in CS. I'd still argue it was Kenny S, but, you know, for the accomplishments, definitely. Now, at that point in time, I watched him when he first started streaming, and then when they first created FPL, I watched some of his games when he streamed them, and I have to say, olofmeister in FPL was like an average level player in the context of FPL. He never had these amazing games where he just took over, wrecked everyone, insane highlights. Someone like Simple might do it, someone like Nico might do it sometimes. There's actually not that much correlation between it, but people go way too hard thinking it is indicative. I mean, meanwhile, there's some players in tier 2 and tier 3 teams who are in FPL, and they have some sick carry games, and they're fucking shit on LAN. So I agree, again, it's very naive. Then the final one, every single comment must include a stale meme that was never funny in the first place. Now, I get that's just a cultural thing, and people who are just surfing through the thread will just upvote things that they just think are funny. But I particularly hate it when people just use the same meme. Haha, he mains an XMS and the 2 flashbangs and a smoke, or like, oh, look, haha, what were the other ones? One tap, Scream is one tapping them. Like, I agree, they are incredibly low effort. And it does sort of show that while, yes, everyone's using the forum for fun, it's not all about just serious discussion. There are a lot of sort of like almost brain dead reactions to things, and it is a shame that those things get upvoted, but whatever. I can scroll past them. It's not the fucking end of my world. So this was from a thread where Guardian was not satisfied with CSGO developers, which obviously doesn't narrow it down because he's tweeted many times about it. I actually think Guardian's just a fucking G. If you ever get to know him as a person, he's very blunt. Brilliant. But he's not necessarily like an asshole. He's just a guy he's very blunt. He doesn't try to polish it up at all or feel like he has to be nice to people. So 144 points. What does this guy have against Valve devs? Literally never said a good thing about them. Like, everything put aside, CS is the best, don't know why that's capitalized, modern day esports FPS game to exist. Like, fucking hell, you play video games for a living and you're still whining, ... question mark. The devs have been doing great during the past weeks. Comments from Valve devs in threads isn't so rare now. It's a sign that Valve is trying to help. But when you have people whining like Guardian all the time, you start to figure out why Valve doesn't talk to us. Let's break this one down because this is a fucking monster, this one, boys. So what does this guy have against Valve devs? Right? They are the ones who change or don't change or update or don't update or make silly decisions like putting a brand new map into a major that no one's played before that affect this guy's career and the way his legacy will be treated and considered for generations to come. No one will know 20 years from now. What? Why did they lose that tournament? All right, there's a brand new map that no one had played before and was really bad. No one will know that. They'll just know he didn't win that tournament. Then this thing literally never said a good thing about them. Bearing in mind, he's trying to provoke action from Valve or the community to notice Valve isn't doing something, and therefore hopefully the community to put pressure on Valve. saying like a good thing about Valve actually won't have the opposite counter effect. Like it won't make them go, the word won't get to Valve, it won't be as popular, won't have a Reddit thread probably, and Valve won't go, awesome, we're doing a great job. So actually there is a utility in what he's doing that is not reasonable in this sense. And also it's his Twitter. He doesn't have to say a good thing. He can even think a good thing and not say it. There's no indication there whatsoever. Then it says, oh, and by the way, when he says like, what does he have against Valve devs? I thought to myself, how long has this guy been around? Because he's very complimentary of Valve now and what they're doing in the last year or so, especially recently. And he doesn't seem to understand why Guardian, who played from day one of CSGO, would be very critical of the devs and wouldn't have faith in them to fix things or radically change their perspective. So I looked at his Reddit account. Reddit account, birthday of the Reddit account, September 2nd, 2016. This guy has not even been following CS for 2 years. Again, that's been out since like August 2012 was when the competitive scene happened. So we're a couple of months away from its 6th birthday. This guy hasn't even watched for 2 years. And then he's like, why is this legendary member of the community who's always understood the game criticizing them for not fixing things? I think they're doing a good job at, well, you didn't watch the first 2/3 of the history of CSGO, did you, mate? So you don't really have an informed opinion, do you? Then you've got the part where he put everything aside, right? You're going to have to please unpack that. Put everything aside, right? So put all faults away, and it's basically the best game ever. Well, yeah, because you put all the faults away. What does that mean, put everything aside? Now, he just means, I think he's got it the wrong way, mate. What I think he means is, consider everything, and it's still the best game ever. Okay, that would make more sense in terms of at least the premise. So let's imagine that premise, okay? CS is the best modern-day esports FPS game to exist. I would say that CSGO isn't even the best version of Counter-Strike to exist, so that's wrong already. Maybe he means modern day, though, as in the last few years. Well, even then, is it the best? Probably, right? But even then, just being the best doesn't mean that you can't improve or you shouldn't improve. Like, if you are the most beautiful woman in a Denny's restaurant, that doesn't mean that you are overall beautiful and of a very high standard. Now, in that scenario, not the best analogy in terms of how you'd improve, because you have to get like plastic surgery or something. But put it this way, if he said, if I wanted to hire someone really good looking to be like a spokesperson, and you got the best looking Denny's waitress and said, well, she's best in the Denny's place, I'd go, well, no, then in that case, we have to go further afield. We've got to look elsewhere for this. And actually, if Denny's, by the way, is trying to get people to be looking good for waitresses, they probably should pick better people themselves. So the problem is you can still criticize Valve and CSGO even if it's the best. You know why? That's how it could get better and improve. And then you let people know that, yeah, we like that it's the best, but we want more as well. I think you should always be reaching for greatness and aspiring to more. Then he says that you consider the comments recently, they're trying to help. No, it's not a sign they're trying to help at all. Valve have made comments in the past. I've talked to Valve devs at events and they'll go, yeah, I'll consider that. And it never comes to play. And then you ask a different Valve dev 2 years later, they've never heard of the idea. No one ever even brought it up. So actually, people who've been around the scene have good reasons to be jaded and cynical about Valve. In fact, tying into an earlier comment, the fact that they succeed so much in business also means they're not incentivized to do any different additional changes, since apparently they're not people who are driven to make the best game ever, despite what this guy says. He's already given them credit for it. Then when he says, but when you have people whining like Guardian all the time, you start to figure out why Valve doesn't talk to us. I've brought this topic up a million times. I think I even did a video on like Valve communicating with it. I'm not sure if I did. If I didn't, I should have done it. Maybe I will do it. But one of the reasons why so many CSGO pros got really underwhelmed and disappointed and cynical about Valve is because for so many years we were communicating with them and trying to be really positive and give them constructive advice, and they never took any of it on board, and almost none of it ever came to pass. And in fact, sometimes you would have infuriating arguments with them at majors where they'd be using like very flimsy or fallacious logic to argue against you and say that's not right, just because they didn't want to consider your idea. And so actually I totally understand, because I know where Guardian comes from, why he's negative or critical about them. And the idea that he's putting the cart before the horse here, that's why Valve doesn't talk to us. No, it's the other way around. Valve not talking to us made people more frustrated, and then that made them think it's not going to change, and they got more and more vitriolic. It's the other way around. You've only been here since 2016, apparently, so you don't know that. Nevertheless, upvoted to fuck, 144 points, of course. Right, this was a thread. Oh, it's the same one, Guardian not being satisfied. This guy says, I like this tweet. Oh, same shit. because it shows 228 points, because it shows the exact reason why Valve doesn't communicate with the community. They only said that they would be working on a new AI in the AMA, but the community somehow twisted that into a promise that the UI would release in 2017. Has it released yet? It's 2018 now, mate. Valve has said, by the way, if I say I'm working on something and I'll fix it, just 20 years later fixing it doesn't make any sense if no one's playing anymore. Yeah, within that statement, you didn't promise a date, but there's a reasonable expectation of when it should come out. And the idea that people are going to play an esports game for 8 years is fairly unreasonable. So, within 6 or 7 years will be a reasonable time frame. Valve has said many times this is exactly why they don't like talking to the community, because anything they say becomes a binding commitment to the community, even if they don't mention a timeline at all. Except everything that Valve says doesn't have to be a commitment on when they'll fix something. I think one of the biggest things Valve could do to fix the community and people's perception of them isn't even change things, isn't even promise to change things or give a date. It's just to explain their rationale and their reasoning. Because oftentimes what's so frustrating is I can't figure out a reason as to why this is supposed to be a good thing. At least if I knew, then in line with ESL inviting a team that's not as good to ESL Cologne, if I knew that it made some sort of business sense or helped with the casual players who make up the overall business of esports, not esports generally, but just gaming as it is in terms of CS, I could understand it and it wouldn't frustrate me as much. So actually the lack of communication has nothing to do with that factor. Valve might suggest that themselves. I haven't seen them suggest it many times. I saw it once or twice by one person, but again, this gets labeled as a Valve, as though it was an official Valve statement. I also think that that's an excuse to get away with not having to do it. It's like what people do in the modern world. People who are like SJWs and feminists won't engage with really intellectual, good faith debaters because they say, but I've had some people just throw talking points at me and not listen to me and just be abusive. Well, why would that affect how you treat someone totally different? That's just an excuse not to have to engage with those opinions. It's not acceptable either, quite frankly. And also remember, we did pay for this motherfucking game, although to be fair, we haven't paid much since. So fair play on that one. Sponge was talking about the state of Pro CS. And this guy, 11 points, says, because I think he was talking about the fact that like so many top teams were like in flux or something and like it was a messy scene or whatever. He says, isn't this what happens when the game runs stale and nothing new is being changed? Teams no longer have much to go on to gain that competitive edge over other players beyond transfers. With everyone in the competition working their ass off, grinding strats and team setups for already min-maxed map pools, there's no wonder that the differences between top teams is so negligible. Fierce competition, but stale competition too. There's no real way to innovate and improve dramatically when the maps have been out for so many years and it's well established what the important picks and bans are. I did a video about why every team can't have a deep map pool that basically addresses all this, but I'll give you a short version tailored to this. So when he says, isn't that what happens when the game runs stale and nothing new is being changed? That same argument has been made in CSGO every single year since the game was released. Every single time people feel themselves that they're bored with the game, or there's a lot of parity, they say, it's because everyone's figured it all out and, nothing's been changed. It's gotten stale. It's just the same CS. I've never seen the same meta in CS for more than about 3 or 4 months. Not least because the meta ends up getting affected by which teams are on top, which depends on who the personnel in the teams are. Therefore, things like roster moves do actually completely change up the whole dynamic of the scene and which map pools are strong and therefore what maps are strong and therefore the meta on those maps and whether those maps are problems. Then he says, with everyone in competition working their ass off, first of all, they're not all working their ass off, mate. Some teams are quite lazy. Some teams get on top and become complacent. Some teams are on the bottom and don't have the motivation or the drive or the right teammates to encourage them to want to work harder. There's a few teams work their ass off. Then he says, grinding strats and team setups for already min-max map pools. The only reason we had a min-max map pool, maybe ever in CS, is currently because you had Nuke and Cash, which a lot of teams didn't play. Now, first of all, Astralis and Mouse are changing that in terms of Nuke, and definitely all the other teams, including Astralis and including FaZe, are making people play Cash. So actually, even that's not the case anymore. It's no longer these min-map pools. And also, if you really think there's min-max map pools, there aren't. There maybe was for a couple of months, like in March and April of this year. There aren't anymore, and there never will be, by the way. There will always be difference. It just depends if the teams that are good on the maps that the top teams don't play aren't good enough. When they become good enough through player transfers or someone switching their style up as the overall meta changes, there will always be a shift in the map pool. There will never be just one map pool and we only play these maps. Then he says there's no wonder the difference between top teams is so negligible. Well, what's great is when he made this comment a month ago, it's already changed. The difference between Astralis and all the other teams is massive. The difference between Mouse Sports and Team Liquid and SK Gaming and NIP is fairly large, actually, considering the skill difference shouldn't be that different. Then he says fierce competition, but stale competition too. That's already collapsed. Then he says there's no real way to innovate and improve dramatically when the maps have been out for so many years. Absolutely inaccurate. I mean, look at Astralis with those nade strats. People over time have come up with different Molotov and smoke strats. As people get strong on maps, you get, if it's a skill-based team, people have to counter them with strats. If it's a strat-based team, people find a way to break the strats, attack earlier, move out before the smokes, attack when you see a counter flash. All sorts of scenarios that change it up. There's never been a case where you had this staleness that people talk about. As I always say, I usually feel like this is someone expressing their own personal lack of interest with the scene anymore. It's not that the scene's stale, they've become stale in terms of their interest for the game and they're projecting that onto everyone else. Okay. This was a thread where Jack Etienne from Cloud9, owner of Cloud9, was talking about CSGO franchising and saying that, you know, if Valve doesn't build it, like it'll sort of like limit the growth of the game. This guy with 319 points says, franchise is good for the orgs and bad for the players. Just look at the recently leaked code of conduct in Overwatch. This is absurd. In CSGO, players have the power. If an org is not treating its team as it should, the players will leave and their fan base with them. TSM and the Astralis Corps, and more recently, SK with all the MIBR rumours. He says Remmers, but we know what he means. Keep the franchising bullshit away from CSGO. Now, here's the thing. Generally, I am against franchising, at least as it has currently been proposed and as it is done in the LCS and in Overwatch League. But I think some of this is a bit unreasonable. Like, when he says it's good for the orgs but bad for the players, it's only bad in the context he said here that they can't leave. But is it, though? Because you already can't leave because you're under contract. Now, if you have a franchise system where there's a roster lock and it ends during the season, yes, you'd be right. But that's not inherent to a franchise system. You wouldn't have to have that to have that. So actually, a franchise system, in terms of contracts like this, could operate identically. And if you can convince your team to let you go in CSGO, which you have to do, you can't just leave no matter what, you also could just leave anyway. Now, by the way, the TSM core didn't leave like that because they were mistreated. What happened is their contract ran out and they signed with someone else. In this case, got the funding and investment to make their own org, which eventually became not their own org. So he hasn't even really given a good example there. Likewise with the SK and MIBR rumours. They're leaving when their contracts are up. They haven't just left SK because they don't like it and gone to MIBR. Again, doesn't really make sense. Then when he says it's good for the orgs, yeah, that's one of the best reasons to do a franchise system. I'm not in favour of it, but I will acknowledge right now, orgs are getting pinched because they don't get much of the revenue and there's not really many broadcast deals for the tournament organisers and they get a very small share, if anything, of that. And they're giving away loads of salary to players because investments inflated the salary market so much. And they're not making that much themselves in terms of merchandising. So they're getting really pinched between everyone. Players are making massive amounts of money. Some tournament organisers are making good money. The game devs are making the most money. And of everyone, the person that's margins are getting crushed from both ends and are getting pinched and squeezed is the org. So I actually think some system that gives the orgs a better payday is good. That's why maybe we could have franchising in one component of CS, just a league or just one tournament, and then the others could all be open circuit. I think that would be cool. By the way, that's what Overwatch League originally was supposed to be, where half the year's Overwatch League and the other half could be a third-party circuit. So let's see if that becomes a model to follow. Then when he says, just look at the recently leaked code of conduct in Overwatch, right? That doesn't have to exist in a franchise system either. It's like saying, if you have a king, it'll all just be corrupt and he'll just be a tyrant. Well, yeah. Many kings have been, but there's also cool kings. And in fact, a cool king can get things done that you can't in an open democratic system because you can't convince everyone to do it. So it doesn't have to follow, and you wouldn't have to have first of all, no code of conduct released, and you wouldn't have to have a prohibitive code of conduct. In fact, in a system that was both a free market open system like this, but had one league in it that was franchised, you wouldn't necessarily be able to control the whole scene tyrannically, and therefore you'd be much more disincentivized to put in ridiculous codes of conduct that put players and fans off, quite frankly. It's also a different game. I don't think people would treat CSGO, as we already don't, the same way they do in games like League of Legends and Overwatch, which are much more catered explicitly from the game developer to identity politics, political correctness, social justice warrior mentalities, etc. There's also a world, by the way, in which it wouldn't be bad for the players. It'd be bad for some players on lower level who aren't in the league, but it would be good for players who are in the top teams, because the franchise system could get more money in from sponsorship and maybe pay-per-view, and therefore those players could get paid more depending on the system that they operate. Right, this comment was from Fnatic playing Team 1 at the WSG semi-finals, and it was a guy with 103 points who says, honestly, this is before, remember, Stu2K went to SK Gaming, which is kind of amusing when you consider the context here. He says, honestly, I don't know what's worse, because obviously Team 1 had beaten Cloud9. The Stewie2K apologists are the radical Brazilian fans who think Team 1 is actually a tier 1 to 2 team. I'm with this guy on both grounds. Like, first of all, in terms of the Brazilian fans, it was ludicrous that they were suggesting, because Team 1 won this one match and went to the semis of this shit tournament, that made them a tier 1 or 2 team. I mean, I don't think Space Soldiers are a tier 1 team, and they were in the final and almost won this tournament. So no, that is ridiculous. And yeah, those fans are mad annoying. But people almost never talk about the Stewie2K apologists. For someone who doesn't know, by the way, because sometimes people get confused here, apologist doesn't mean you apologize as in like, oh, I'm sorry that he's bad. Apologist actually just means you sort of defend the person and make the case for them, and actually maybe why they aren't wrong, or they aren't something they've been slandered with or alleged to be. So in this case, apologists means people who try to explain away that Stewie2K isn't a bad player or that he's an amazing player. Now, I will say, I think Stewie2K, relative to the other star players of the scene of CSGO over the last 2 years, is one of the most overrated we've ever had. And mainly it comes from more Cloud9 flares being on Reddit than others, generally more Americans using Reddit than the overall makeup of total fans in the world. All these factors, the fact that he has a good personality, that he obviously streams, speaks English, which is the common language of most people on Reddit. There are a lot of good reasons as to why people are biased, but I've always felt like they were way too biased. Like, people talk about Stewie2K as though he's done things individually that would put him on a par with like Shox or Nico. I mean, people will criticize Nico for how he performs in finals, and yet Stewie2K wasn't even in these finals of like majors. He wasn't even in position, and oftentimes, I mean, he was in one recently, obviously. He was in position to where he failed in these scenarios many times and didn't get bashed in as much as someone like an Eco, etc. Then you got to consider, people always tried to suggest as though, like, sometimes he was like hard carrying the team, except for 2016, and even then he had help. He was almost never straight hard carry. He was never doing what Simple and Nico have done in Mouse Sports and Navi. Like, that was never happening, or Kenny S and Titan. That never was the case. So I always thought people overrated him. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. He's certainly one of the best in NA, and at times he was probably the best NA player in like mid-2016. But I do think people went way too far, and they definitely explain away all of his bad games. I've seen this guy have so many bad games in like finals and semi-finals. He improved over the last year and a half in that sense, but early on he had lots, and now I'd say he's still like a 50-50, or maybe he does it like 40% of the time. He just has bad games when his team's in a big match. So you wouldn't get away with that sort of ratio if you are a Shox, Kenny S, Guardian, Nico, Simple. You have to be like 80% really good to earn your star status, so you get criticized massively. Right, this was a thread where Simple was happy and someone was like complaining about how Henry G had made some comment about how like it's so good to see Simple like happy in the game and playing so well because he's so exceptional, and like, you know, so few people could ever be as good as him, basically. Now I had to put the comment in a text file because I saved the comments in a text file. I checked them just before we do the episode because unfortunately he actually deleted this, which I don't know if that means he was downvoted so much it automatically deleted, because I've seen something like that before. Usually people get downvoted and they're just little bitches and they delete, but at the time that it was up, it was at 58 points, which is why I put it here. And he put, I don't like how Henry underplays Simple's dedication to the game by saying you're just born with that skill. By the way, I don't know if he did say he was born with it, but Simple is so exceptionally skilled, I could believe there's a genetic component to it. And then he says, I'm pretty sure Simple has worked harder at his individual game than any other pro. The man has an absurd amount of in-game hours, probably the highest out of any pro. Right, first of all, in terms of historically, I'm pretty sure someone like Get Right would beat him, NBK, these are other examples. But when he says, like, that he worked harder at his individual game, he has an assumed, that's all accurate. Like, in terms of current pros currently practicing, Simple for the last like year and a half has practiced probably more hour for hour than almost any other pro. So yes, he's definitely honed his game like a Kobe Bryant, like a Michael Jordan, and that definitely deserves to be credited and praised, which isn't what Henry was going against, quite frankly. You can be genetically fantastic and amazing at the game, and that can still be a point worth making. That pointing it out as if it's a fact doesn't undermine the fact that he also worked very hard. People who tend to be fabulously talented but don't work very hard don't tend to be the best player, quite frankly. It almost never happens. That's why I'm amazed when people like Shox do it. And even then, Shox doing it tends to coincide with his periods of motivation and playing a bit more. Then he says, edit. I'm not implying Simple isn't talented or that someone can simply just work hard and be as good as him. Simple is the product of when talent makes hard work. It's these two combined that make him so unique, so polished. His work ethic should be highlighted more often than revered. I agree, but in this case, it doesn't have to be brought up every time. And Henry G's point was a very good one, which is that even very good players will never be as good as Simple. You'll just never see. He's saying this to actually credit the fact that it is hard work and talent meeting. You're actually kind of missing Henry G's point here. So even though you made some good points yourself and there's a lot of validity to it, I think you're actually being very unfavorable of how you're reading Henry G's comment. This was a thread that was about Simple having like insane stats versus phase. And this guy says, there's actually a two-parter to this, so I'll put the other one up as well. Let me have a look here. Because this is what's going to be funny for you, is that I'm going to put them underneath each other. It's the same guy. So he has 11 points at first, and he says, am I the only one who thinks Nico is overrated? Because people talking about Nico being like one of the best players in the world. Because obviously he's playing in phase and didn't have such a great game. He has lots of highlight-worthy plays. But for the most part, he seems to get tilted and vanish from the server. Now, there are occasions, it's rare when Nico does get tilted and vanish from the server. I'd agree with you. But if you look at his body of work, he is a fabulous player, one of the best we've ever seen, and already has an amazing career after only a couple of years as a top pro. But the same guy, someone then points out, like, well, no, actually, if you look, the stats all bear it out that Nico's amazing. He has had great tournaments. Like, what are you talking about? The same guy says this. Fair play for him not admitting it, but this is hilarious. Just think about that this is what people could be like in Reddit, but you don't get a reply, so you don't know this. He says, yeah, probably. I'm honestly just shooting from the hip, but I get a feeling Nico is limiting himself lately by sulking so much whenever the team is down a couple of points. Really bizarre sort of like psychological analysis there, but okay. I think a mental coach would do wonders for him. You rarely see him... I fucked it up, haven't I? I've got the wrong comment there. Yeah, god damn it. Right, wait there. Let me just get the right one. Actually, maybe it isn't there. I'll just read it to you, the other comment, because the other comment was by the same guy, and this will make you laugh. So, okay, first thing here, he said, I think he's overrated. He says, admittedly, I haven't been following FaZe as much as some of you have, but from the matches I've seen, Oakland and Boston mainly, I believe this comment, by the way, was during Star Series, Nico seemed to sulk a lot and barely made an impact, while Guardian was the heavy hitter. Call me crazy, but I'd say Guardian is the best player on FaZe right now. I know that the circle jerk right now is Nico is number 2. He actually says number and writes it that way. But I'd rather put Guardian or Simple as number 2 after Cold. Right, first of all, at this point in time, I don't know why he's picking Cold. Because again, the timeline's so off here. And then the idea that Guardian's the best player. Guardian's the best player in finals. But the reason Simple has better stats in many tournaments is because over the tournament, he's getting the stats because he's performing better. So again, and by the way, the idea that this guy only is really going off 2 tournaments. And which tournaments were those ones? Oh, the ones where FaZe lost in the final, were they? Well, I wonder why he looked bad then, right? You didn't talk about when he was playing amazingly in the semis of a different tournament that you didn't see, or when he won ECS, for example. Nah, just don't comment on any of those. Like, it's beyond hilarious, isn't it? Right, now let's look at the comment that I tried to link to, which I can't even remember. What's mad is I think I've actually just screenshotted the wrong one there. So we'll just skip past that. I fucked that one up, boys. Right, this one says... It's in a thread where I said that if you look at players like Steel at the time in Team Liquid, Kiyashima, obviously his history in FaZe, it would make a great example of why most pros should put in effort now to learn English so that one day you have this option in your career to go to an international team or a team that speaks in English anyway, like an American team, Australian team, Renegades, Cloud9, Team Liquid. And this guy, 16 points, says, couldn't you say the same about any language though, particularly Danish in this case, since they seem to have several higher tier teams right now? Well, no, actually you couldn't, because first of all, Danish is spoken by significantly less people. There's no guarantee in the future, like in a year or two when you get good at English, Danish rather, that Denmark will still be on top with as many teams. And the very fact that they have so many top teams right now means that they don't need international players, and they'll keep recruiting players from Denmark, since you get a natural advantage from having people from the same culture and same language. So actually, this is a terrible analogy. Now, let's have a look. Where are we going next? This is from where it said that NAF had won a 100k major tournament with, I'm assuming it's going to say like 3 teams, because he won with Renegades at the Star Series at I-League Invitational Season 2 or whatever. He obviously won CS Summit 2 with Team Liquid, and then he obviously won E-League Season 2 with Optic back in 2016. Now, this guy, 12 points, says, also kind of strange that that Major is apparently a lower tier than Premier. Right. This is a comment referring to how on Liquipedia they have a ranking of sort of the quality of a tournament. And so their top tier of tournament is called Premier, and their second tier of tournament is called Major. But obviously in traditional sports, tennis, golf, Major means the biggest and best tournament. In CSGO, Major means the World Championship. In Dota, Major means the tournaments that, along with the International, are the most important to win. In almost every scenario of life, Major, because, you know, something's major, if it's of immense status and prestige, means something really big. It is weird that Wikipedia, a wiki, would use it to refer to something that inherently tends not to be something really big. It tends to be the smaller thing differentiated against Premier, which is the bigger thing, which is what we would traditionally call a major. Now, what's funny about this is it has no application anymore. It never made sense to me from day one, but unfortunately it comes from StarCraft 2. And when they made Liquipedia, I mean, it originally came from Brood War, but StarCraft 2 is when this became ubiquitous. They decided this terminology. Okay, one, I'll give them credit. In StarCraft, they didn't have majors. So, okay, they didn't have that term. But already, tennis and golf existed, so already was confusing. And I've actually seen mainstream journalism articles written where someone went on Wikipedia and said this person won 2 majors this year, but he actually just won like some small domestic like online cups or small lands, because that's what major meant. So you gave a completely incorrect, inaccurate initial kind of communication to people who are more casual. Then you've got to consider that, okay, even if you do it in StarCraft, change it for the other games. But no, Liquipedia, because of the arrogance and the hubris of the people who made Liquipedia, decided to maintain this system into other games, including games like CSGO, where we already have major meaning something different. So on CSGO, Liquipedia, a CSGO major, like E-League, Atlanta, Boston, would be considered class Premier. Meanwhile, a tier 2 LAN like Bets Championship would probably be considered a major. So it already makes no sense to continue this. It is just stubbornness and a refusal to be pragmatic, but they continue to do it. And it's something I've been pissed off for many years. And they've always tried to explain it away of the Liquipedia people. And even though I like Liquipedia generally, I think it's a great venture, that is annoying, I have to say. Right, this is the comment from 3 months ago when LDLC decided to kick existence, the main reason being that the players in the team didn't want to play with him, and they all listened to the players and they kicked him. This guy says, 636 points, good idea to kick the person who turned LDLC from bots into bots who can challenge other teams. Because for anyone who doesn't know, in EPL, for example, they actually finished with a 50% win rate. They won something like 11 or 9 games. I think it would probably be 11, right? I think they won it because I think it was 12 teams in the league. They won 11 games and lost 11 games. That's amazing for EPL. Like that is way better than the team was on LAN and than they are as a general team. And they were placing well above teams like Virtus Pro and Na'Vi, very good teams that are much better on LAN. Well, I guess actually that's implausible for Virtus Pro because they were shit on LAN, but Na'Vi was a much better team on LAN. In fact, actually Virtus Pro would still be better than LDLC. Let's be reasonable. Just not very good teams on LAN. That'd be a ridiculous statement to make. I'm thinking of history myself there, right? Now, that's why when this guy was kicked, a lot of us like this guy thought, well, that's ridiculous. Like, listen, kick him because you don't like why he's in the team, sure, but you have essentially given your team a death sentence. They're never going to be as good. They're not going to be relevant. And what do you know? Months later, they're getting relegated from LDLC because they were utter shit. I think finished in like last place in EPL. Right, 2 more comments to go, boys. This is from Existence's statement. I think it was his statement where... The thing is, it says 3 months ago. So what is that from? I think it's because people talked about the fact that Body replaced existence in LDLC was when LDLC, it was like LDLC, G2. It's when G2 then, after bombing Malmo with their first tournament, then obviously did amazingly at EPL Season 3, almost won it over Luminosity, then did win ECS Season 1 over Luminosity and Fnatic, and was a very good team. And so obviously that was an upgrade at the time in the short term. Then people, obviously, because in the modern day, Body hasn't been very good, basically for 2017 and 2018. This guy with 13 points says, Body is one of the most overrated players, which in itself would be a very controversial statement, but listen to the caveat. It's like me saying Stu 2K is overrated, but you have to listen to the caveat. He is a perfect example of underrated players becoming overrated because of circle jerk. They should put NBK in Body support spots and get an actual IGL. Now, I kind of agree with him on the second part. I think Body actually did a good job in a supportive sense in the 2016 lineup with Shocks, Scream, RPK, but that's because it was a very loose team and you weren't really a support player in that team. You just ended up being like a bomb set anchor or something. NBK, I think, is a better traditional support and a better anchor, so I think he would do a better job now, and actually Body showed he couldn't really do that when the team was trying to run a set style with Shocks. Then you got to add in, I agree with the first part, especially. Like, this is a trend that happens. I get it. Because someone is actually considered quite underrated, you end up saying they're underrated so much that eventually makes them overrated, because then people are only seemingly ever talking about them positively because they were underrated before. So essentially, it's like the pendulum swings the other way. And I kind of agree with that point overall. And I actually think Body got way overrated from 2016. And people conveniently ignored how bad he actually was at times in 2017. I thought he was one of the worst parts of the team and really made them lack for firepower. And yet wasn't a great support player. Last comment. This is from a thread where Taz was initially benched so that Mishu could stand in. This guy with 16 points was talking about Virtus Pro the year before. He says, E-League Major 2017, Krakow Major, and the Epicenter 2017. These were the events that broke VP's spirit. First of all, I'll just go ahead and say, E-League Major definitely didn't break their spirit, because what was the next event after the E-League Major? Well, it was obviously DreamHack Masters Las Vegas, where they actually convincingly beat Astralis, the number one team in the world, and won the fucking tournament. So if that was their spirits broken, I don't think that adds up there. I think you've made a mistake in your timeline and you've gone too early on this one, because the rest of your point might have something to it. Let's go back to it. They were ploughing their way in both E-League and Epicenter, but lost in grand finals with extremely close matches. A lot of unfortunate rounds happened for them, and in Krakow, they lost against the underdogs in their hometown. Right. He then says, these events, maybe not Krakow, could go in VP's favour easily, and they maybe could have had a great set 2017. Then Taz wouldn't be benched for sure. It is sad that such an unfortunate events broke them, and now the legendary roster is no more. Right? This implication that like they were ploughing through E-League, as I already said, the E-League one's irrelevant, mate. Skip that. Epicenter, okay. So yes, they were ploughing Epicenter. Were they though? They won a lot of close games. I wouldn't really say they were fully Virtus ploughing. And they got to the finals, but they were playing stylistically, I guess, like that. And in the final, they had an extremely close match, which they lost. Now, I don't think that them winning those two tournaments, the Major and Epicenter, changes almost anything. I think they still would have played fairly similarly. They might have been more confident. There might have been less infighting. Okay, I'll give you that. I think they still would have had the same slump, same problems. Funnily enough, the one event he says that maybe they wouldn't have won or done well in is Krakow. I actually think that's the one event that could have gone in their favour, because first of all, they played Immortals in the semi-finals, and they had to play that match the same day that they'd beaten North in the quarterfinals. So like every other team that's ever done the quarterfinal into semi on the same day, they lost. It is a lot more strain, and the other team gets more time to study you. Then you've got to add in that semi-finals, they played Immortals, who was on a miracle run. Now, Immortals wasn't an elite team. They were a solid upset team. I think Virtus Pro could have won this match. Maybe they even would have if the semi had been played a different day. I don't know about that. I think it would have been close. But I think Virtus Pro could have won this match. If they'd won that match, they'd have been playing Gambit in the final. And while I would favour Gambit a bit, especially because of the map pool, I think Virtus Pro could have won that final. I think once they made the semis and Astralis lost, I think VP on paper was probably the favourite, because they had the history of being in major finals and of playing under pressure and of delivering in the big majors, as they still were doing to some degree at this major, making top four. And so I actually think, funnily enough, he picked the wrong tournament to omit. Meanwhile, he put in a tournament that doesn't make any sense, E-League Major. And then for Epicenter, I think he doesn't realise what a one-off is. And the fact that they did so well that tournament, still didn't win, tells you that if that was their best day, well, no wonder on their other days when they had their B, C, and D games, they weren't even close to winning tournaments. This video was made possible by Dean Tanglis, Sanity, Gman, Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Alex Adams, Mikkel Hansen, Jerky's Minion, Anthony, Bash, Daniel Yordanov, Yordan Tsenkov, TTMXMP, VeXii, HawpT, Travis T. Greb. Just like my man, a lot of people think you can't tell me nothing. But I've graduated from that mindset, and now it is possible to have influence over some of the people I have on my shows, some of the topics I cover, to ask me questions directly and get exclusive teasers for upcoming projects I'm working on. Unlock the code to the streets and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link below.